Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Awesome Cody. As usual, I'm your host, Cody, and today we are continuing July's theme of awesome comedies from when I was younger. Basically, these are movies that I watched, or comedy movies that I watched when I was little. And, so we're continuing with that. Anyways, so today's movie is Mel Brooks' History of the World Part 1. Which the title itself is a joke in its own right because there was never a part 2. There's a bit at the end which I'll get to that makes it part of the joke, and I'll get to that. What I mean by that when I get to that part. I'm gonna go in order. The writer, director, and producer of this is Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks is best known for, this movie, Blazing Saddles, Spaceballs, Young Frankenstein. 12 Angry Chairs? Right? 12 Angry Chairs? What is that name of that one? The Producers, Being Amazing. Just in general, 12 Angry Chairs, that was right. Or the 12 Chairs. So the producers, 12 Chairs, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, Silent Movie, High Anxiety, History of the World Part 1, Spaceballs, Life Stinks, Robin Hood Men in Tights, and Dracula Dead and Loving It. By far the worst thing he's ever made, by the way, is Dracula Dead and Loving It. One of the worst movies ever. Just tremendously terrible. So that's Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks is amazing. His son's pretty awesome too. Max Brooks wrote World War Z, which then turned into a movie that had nothing to do with the book other than the name and the fact it had zombies in it. Mel Brooks, he also acts in his own movies. Whatever. There's television-wise, he's done a lot of television shows that he's directed. He directed a few things, but I know he was acting on a lot of them. And I think he produced some of them too. But earlier stuff would be he was a writer on Your Show of Shows, Caesar's Hour, which is one of Sid Caesar's shows. He also Sid Caesar Invites You, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. He was the guest on there 19 times. He co-created Get Smart, the television program from the early or late to mid 60s. Electric Company. He was on that for 780 episodes. I say on that. He was a voice on that for 780 episodes, which is ridiculous, but, whatever. Daytime Hollywood Squares, he was on that 15 times. Anyhow, he's done a lot of stuff. Mel Brooks is one of the best comedians of all time, and he's just amazing. So this movie, for the folks who don't know what this is, and a little gripe I have, this is not available to get online almost anywhere that I could find, except for, oddly enough, for $15 you can get it on YouTube, which I did not do. I was like, no. I like me some YouTube, but not enough to pay $15 to watch this on there. That's insane. It's not on iTunes, it's not on Amazon, it's not on Netflix, it's not on anything. I have literally almost every streaming service you can possibly imagine, or access to them, and it's not on any of them. You can just Google it or Bing it. Bing will probably bring you Google anyways, but you just look it up. And I was like, why is this not available on anything? And the only thing that shows up is YouTube. And I was like, bruh, what the hell? And if you're listening to this in another country, by the way, I think it's on Netflix still, because it used to be on Netflix, and I was going to watch it on Netflix, but it's not there anymore. And I was like, well, I guess I'll just buy it on iTunes. Not even available. Blew my mind. I don't know why. It's insane. It was produced or distributed by 20th Century Fox, which is now Disney. So I thought it would be like on Hulu or something, but literally nowhere. So I don't know. It was weird, but it's so this movie is referred to as a sketch comedy film. Basically, it's a parody film in a way, but it's basically made up of, technically speaking, 5 vignettes, but really 6 because the last one is a bit in its own right. The 6th one is a bit in its own right. I'll get to it in a little bit, but 5 main parts. So the whole thing is, it starts off with the parody of, basically the whole thing is a parody of historical events throughout time that had different, changing of meanings, and they are the Stone Age, the Old Testament, the Roman Empire, the Spanish Inquisition, and the French Revolution. The way this first starts, before I forget, I should tell a story afterwards or I'll forget. I'll probably forget like I did last week. I didn't tell you my story I was going to tell you about Police Academy. And I think I forgot to tell you a story about Brewster's Millions too. I think so. I mean, I get rambling on here and I forget the fuck what I'm doing. But anyways, I'll tell you my story about this now. So the first time I ever watched this, this movie came out in 1981. This is the year I was born. So if you do the math real quick, 39. There you go. But I didn't watch this until I was probably 6 or 7, maybe 8, somewhere around there. And it was lent to my brother and I via a neighbor who lived in an apartment complex. We live in a complex. He was oddly enough, actually, he was 20 apartments away from us. The reason I know that is because literally his apartment number is 20 higher than ours. And he let us borrow. Well, he didn't just borrow the movie. So the reason I'm bringing this story up is to date myself. I watched this movie the first time ever on Laserdisc. So, if you don't know what a Laserdisc is, imagine a DVD. Remember those in Blu-ray that you have now? Imagine that Blu-ray or DVD. So you have that disc, and it's 3.5 inches wide, whatever, circumference or diameter. Sorry, not circumference. It's around. So it's 3 inches or whatever, right? I think that's what CDs are. I don't know. There's one in front of me. I don't know. Anyhow, more than 3 inches, 6 inches. I don't know. Whatever. That's not 6 inches. What is that? 5? Doesn't matter. I don't know. Google how what's the width of a DVD or a CD? It's the same fucking thing. I don't know. I used to know that, but anyhow, I digress. Imagine that, right? So shiny side, label side up, shiny side on the bottom, if you're doing it right. Or some movies have the little ring in the middle that's colored because they're double-sided. Anyhow, again, sorry, random tangent. So, the Laserdisc is a 12-inch version of that, right? I believe they're 12 inches. So like the size of a record, but completely mirrored, very rigid, and you can't really touch them, otherwise they get fucking ruined. But it was the first digital media that was out. Like I said, I watched this on that when I was in between 7, I want to say 7 or 8, maybe 9 years old, whatever. And I didn't get half the jokes, but that's a different story, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But I just remember this because he let us borrow his Laserdisc player, and Laserdisc player, massive fucking machine, probably weighed like 50, 60 pounds, fucking ridiculous. He'd load this up. It plays this movie. One of the things about it was one of the only medias that played movie in the original aspect ratio of movies. So the 16:9, which is actually technically not true 16:9 if I remember correctly. It doesn't matter. It's actually more than that. But it is, it's crazy, like insane. The fact that like this giant platter, silver platter, would play a movie, and I didn't understand how it worked back then. But basically came in what looks, if from the record, looks like an LP, vinyl, whatever you want to call it. It's like that big old sleeve. Slide the disc out, put it in the player, it plays. It was ridiculous. Maybe that's why we watched it for the first time. And it was, I laughed a lot because it was goofy and like weird shit. And that time in my life, my parents were very forgiving about what my brother and I watched. I've talked about this before on here. We used to be able to watch R-rated stuff all the time. It was like trying to remember what movie we had on the Laserdisc that time, because he gave us a couple movies to watch. I think Ghostbusters was one of them. I think we had Star Wars, A New Hope. Technically, is what we had. I don't remember. We had a bunch. He gave us a bunch to watch. Let us borrow them. It's crazy. So the to watch him on this, it just blew my mind. And I was like, I didn't understand it. DVDs weren't a thing, so they didn't have anything to compare it to. And I was like, it was nuts. It was, anyways. So Laserdisc was how I watched it, and it blew my mind. That was how, because I was used to these little black square boxes called VHS tapes, and video hi-fi system, I believe. But I just, in my brain, I just remember this awe-inspiring thing that we watched this movie on. And it's always, whenever I see it, I always think of that, and I don't know why. I do know, because that was the first time I ever saw it, so that's the memory I associate with it. But yeah, it was so crazy. But anyhow, so History of the now I'm done rambling for the last fucking 10 minutes. History of the World Part 1. Ensemble cast. Mel Brooks plays a main character in all but the first one and technically the sixth one. But so it breaks down like this. Oh, I forgot I was going to say. So this movie technically is rated R. I believe it got a rated R when it was released in 1981. But it was rated R for, this is a list, and I kid you not, this is all in one movie: crude sexual humor, language, comic violence, sex and nudity, and drug use. All the things that I love in life. So, I mean, it definitely hit the spot with me. But this movie is a satire. It's a parody. It is by far the most, and I think there's a reason you can't find it pretty much anywhere, is the most unabashed comedy ever. Mel Brooks has this sense of humor that I get too much. I understand it way too much. It's super dark, super crude. I'm trying to say lots of words of how to say it. It's not for the folks who are gonna be easily offended. Like, there's words in this movie that are used nonchalant, that are frowned upon in everyday life nowadays, and it's ridiculous. It's just, I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's one of those things where, like, to me, words are words, but people have different contexts, and I understand that. But there's things in this, I'm not going to say the words because people will get crazy offended. I'll say fuck all day, but there's certain words in this that just touch people the wrong way. But the language for sure, the crudeness of it, the humor, the crude humor in it is just what I thrive on every day of my life. But this movie wouldn't be made this way today. And really, I don't think this movie can be made at all today because of the ridiculousness that it has in it, and the absurdity. But anyhow, I digress. So movie starts off with the Stone Age, a caveman played by Sid Caesar, Chief Caveman, as they say, in the credits, is shown. It basically chronicles the invention of fire, the very first artist, the first marriages, both Homo sapien and then homosexual, early weapons, the earliest funerals, also depicts the attempts of comedy and music, entertainment, and just in general. That's it. And it's fantastic. And the bit that always gets me is the very first bit, the invention of fire. You see Sid Caesar sitting around with a bunch of other cavemen. He's got 2 stones and a pile of sticks in front of him, and he's hitting it, trying to get this to light fire. Another caveman comes in from the side with a torch lit on fire ready so he can see better, and he goes, "Oh, that." And you think he's going to grab it and use that to light the fire to keep them warm. Nay. He tries to heat up the rock and then tosses the rock onto the sticks, and it does nothing. And then he gives the torch back and says, "I don't know." It's pretty funny. And then one of the other real big things, because, again, the thing about satire, I didn't say this again, the thing about satire is designed by the smartest of people to make fun of, but also to shine a light on certain things. In this one, what I'm talking about, because it talks about politics and homosexuality and all these different things. But this instance that next I bring up in the Stone Age is the art one, and it's this gag that I've always lived by that I never understood until later in life, really. But it's critics, and if you ever heard me talk on here as well as on the main podcast, I loathe critics. They are the second worst profession you can have that your opinion counts in anything. And I'm not going to go into it, but the joke is the first artist is seen making a cave painting, and all the other cavemen are just loving it. And then they're like, "Ooh," and a dude walks up, and he's like, the narrator, who's the voice of is narrated by, I think it's Carl Reiner through the whole thing. Maybe not. Does Carl Reiner do the beginning? No, Orson Welles. I'm sorry. Orson Welles does the narrating. Carl Reiner plays the voice of God in the Old Testament. But the part I'm getting to is, so basically this dude comes in, and the narrator says, along with the first artist, gives us the turn of the coin, or the also the rise of the first critic. And he looks at it, stands up on a rock, and pisses on it because he's pissing on someone else's art because he doesn't think it's good. That's the whole point. It just makes me laugh. And I didn't get that at the time, other than the fact that he was peeing on the wall, which made me laugh when I was little. And then later in life, I understood why they were saying that, because critics are the scum of the earth, and they are leeches, and they should never be given power whatsoever in the history of human entertainment. Anyhow, I digress. So then it goes on to, so it shows different things. A very comical violence thing of basically the first marriage, a dude hits a lady over the head, drags her into a cave. Then it says then the first homosexual marriage, and you see a guy hit another guy in the head and drags him into the cave. just a funny way because it's an old old joke of the cavemen. Used to bash the women on the head and drag them away. Early funerals, early music is they drop a rock in a guy's hand and he makes this high note and the guy's like, sounds good to him. So then he starts hitting him and making him make those sounds. They make a choir out of it. It's quite funny. Then we jump to the Old Testament. I should say the first two vignettes, the Stone Age and the Old Testament, are very short. It's the Roman Empire and the French Revolution they spend the most time on. It's not like they delve into it and teach you all about it. It just, those are the longest ones. But so the Old Testament, Moses being played by Mel Brooks, twice in this, by the way. He's that in the Old Testament as well as the Roman Empire, which I'll get to later. But he is shown coming down from Mount Sinai. I don't know. But basically, he hears the voice of God play uncredited by Carl Reiner, and he tells God that he's bestow him the knowledge that he's supposed to pass on to mankind, and it's the giving of the reception of the law to the people. So then he comes down from the mountain with these stone tablets, and he says, "The Lord Jehovah has given unto us these 15." And then he accidentally drops one of them. They shatter. And then he goes, "Oh wait, 10 commandments for all to obey." And it's a joke that, he made there was 15, but he broke one of them. I don't have to explain the joke to you. It's really funny. And then that's the end of that vignette. It's really funny. Then you have the Roman Empire. Roman Empire has the largest amount of, I would say, set pieces by far. I don't know why I stuttered. I thought about that. It's a lot of stuff is shot. I want to say it was at Universal Studios. I think so. I could have looked this up, but I did not look it up at all. Anyways, one of my favorite bits about this is Caesar's Palace, and I'll get to that. So basically, Mel Brooks' character, Comicus, is a stand-up philosopher. Joke on a stand-up comedian. His agent, Swiftus, played by Ron Carey, lands him a gig at Caesar's Palace, playing the main room, the big room. On their way there, they meet a couple other extra characters. One, who the first one they meet is an Ethiopian slave named Josephus, hilarious, played by Gregory Hines. Then they also meet Miriam, who is a Vestal virgin, who's played by Mary Margaret. I think it's Margaret. Maybe it's Margaret. Mary Margaret Humes, and who Comicus and falls in love with instantly. Her and with him as well, and the Josephus is being sold on a slave auction, and then he doesn't get bought, so he tries to tell about how useful he is and how much money he can be made because he's entertaining. Nobody likes him. He's about to be thrown away. When stuff happens, Madeline Kahn's character comes in, who is Empress Nympho. Hilarious name. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mention this earlier. This movie is full of puns, and if you know me or have ever listened to me talk about stuff, I love puns. They just make me giggle. Lowest form of comedy ever, as most people say, but really, if you think about it, it's actually one of the highest because you have to be able to create something out of nothing. Anyhow, puns, they're all over this fucking movie. Matter of fact, the title is technically a pun, but it's really a satire of something called I can't remember with History of the World Volume 1. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. It's a play on like a title, but I'll get to it again in the later thing. So then they get in the employ of Madeline Kahn's character, or well, Josephus does as a wine server guy. But then they jump to the palace, which is one of the best jokes I think plays off visually in this, is they film it at Caesar's Palace. So the opening, the entrance to Caesar's Palace is the hotel in Vegas, Caesar's Palace. And they film all these people in togas and shit going into Caesar's Palace. And they're using the automated walkway. If you've ever been to Vegas, I don't know if that's even there anymore. Someone might be able to correct me. I think Caesar's Palace still has the moving walkways, the moving sidewalks. They might not, actually. I've been there in years. Did they have when I was there last time? I don't know. I forget. Anyhow, they're moving sidewalks. They're conveyor belts for people. And they use them. And they have guards standing there. And they have the statues. But they shoot the front of Caesar, like the hotel, Caesar's Palace, with the words Caesar's Palace on it as the front of the actual palace. It's so funny to me. It just, I don't know. It could be the dumbest joke ever, but I think it's fucking hilarious, and I laugh my ass off every time I see it because it's the real Caesar's Palace. Anyhow, so Dom DeLuise plays Emperor Nero, who is this fat slob of a man who's gorging himself on food and ogles pretty maidens and waits to be entertained. Well, Comicus forgets his audience and begins cracking insults, one-liners about the Emperor's abundant body contours and corrupt ways, getting him to basically be about to be killed. And then the Ethiopian Josephus pours a jug of wine on Nero's lap and is ordered to fight Comicus to death during dessert. And so they kind of fight. They go and they run away, and basically a bunch of shit happens. They flee the palace. They are escaping on Miracle, the horse from earlier I didn't mention, who's the fastest horse in the land. And as they're getting away, they're starting to pull away, but they're not far enough. So Josephus catches wind of something, catches a smell he's very familiar with, and tells him to pull over. And there's a giant field of weed. He calls it Roman Red. He takes it, asks for some parchment, rolls a giant joint, and then lights it and uses that to get the soldiers who are following them high, who distracts them, and then they get away, leading them off to go to a town where they're going to get on a boat to go to Judea, and so on and so forth. So, while waiting, when they're escaping, they go to this town, and they need to essentially have jobs and whatever. And so they see this it's basically Fishmonger Place. It's a restaurant. There's a sign that says "Help Wanted," hostess, waiter, and dishwasher. And she's like, I can be, Miriam says, I can be the hostess. And Comic says, I can be the waiter. And Joseph goes, I can be, and I can't remember what he says, but he says something, he goes, fine, dishwasher. Because, obviously the loneliest job, and goes to the slave. It's a joke. Anyways, so they're working there. His first time, the owner calls Comicus over, and he says, hey, we have a private party going on. It's very important. You need to be on your best behavior. And he says, but push the mulled wine. Big joke. So then he goes in the private room, the supper room, and it is a long table with a bunch of dudes, and ends up being the Last Supper. And there's a joke about Jesus' name, because they're like, he's just trying to get their orders, like they're being all serious. He's like, Jesus, and he's yes. And Jesus is played by John Hurt, by the way. This is great. And there's a little gag between him and Comicus about the name Jesus and things like that, because technically Comicus is played by Mel Brooks, who is Jewish, and so it doesn't matter. Sorry, it's just funny to me. Then the door bursts open and a dude comes in. You realize it's Leonardo da Vinci, because he's the one that paints the Last Supper, the painting. And he sees the table and he's like, all I have is backs here. If you want to be in the painting, go to the other side. So then they cram on the other side of the table, It cuts to the point of view of Leonardo da Vinci, and you see the Last Supper setup where they're all posing and holding up a silver tray behind Jesus' head to act like the halo of the sun is Mel Brooks' Comicus, and so that puts him in the Last Supper. Just makes me fucking laugh every single time. Then you have the musical number, who is which is the Spanish Inquisition, hilarious production a la The Producers, because he made that movie and it's hilarious. In play, I believe he wrote the play too. That could be wrong. I could look it up, but I'm not gonna. I'm wasting too much time already. So then they go through and they talk about the Spanish Inquisition, and nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, but that's a different thing. And there's this big song and dance number, and talks about it. And there's a cameo by what's his name? God, the two that do the Jackie Gleason, and who's the other one? Oh, God damn it. I can't remember who it was. I should have pulled it up. I didn't pull it up because I'm dumb. Damn it. Who was it? Is it in here? Not Jackie Gleason. It's right here. Jackie Mason and Ronnie Graham do cameos of Jewish torture victims. Fucking hilarious. Talking about putting red hot pokers in his butt, and like, it's just this fucking ridiculous. And then the most ridiculous thing ever is they play a game show thing where he spins a big wheel and he wins these giant fucking oversized coins come out. It's just, it makes me laugh every single time. But then the most ridiculous thing is he says, send in the nuns, and these nuns come in, and all of a sudden you hear this noise, and the chains start, and the floor starts coming up, and it's a pool, and they strip off their habits, or habit? Is it the head thing? Whatever, they're the gowns or whatever. I don't know what they're called. And they're fucking synchronized swimmers, and they do this routine where then they dump a bunch of Jews in there, and then they drown the Jews. It's fucking ridiculous. It's just so funny to me. Anyhow, it's the most ridiculous thing, but super hilarious. Aquatic ballet with the nuns. Just so... It's supposed to be water torture. It's just... makes me laugh. So ridiculous. Anyhow, then we jump to the French Revolution, which is one of my favorite ones because it's so ridiculous, and so crude, and one of my favorite versions of chess. My three versions of chess that I love the most. The version of chess from this, Battle Chess, the old video game from computers from back in the day, I want to say early 90s, probably closer to late 80s. No, early 90s. Had have been. Right? Early 90s? That don't matter. Battle Chess. Look it up. And then of course, Wizard's Chess from Chess. Wow. Wizard's Chess from Harry Potter. Because they're all violent, and this one actually includes sex, which is hilarious to me. But I digress again. French Revolution starts off with Madame de Frage, who incites a mob of French revolutionaries to overtake the king. Well, meanwhile, King Louis of France, played by Mel Brooks, is warned by his advisor Count de Monet, or Count de Money, played by Harvey Korman, who, of course, I just said he's always referred to as, or mistakenly called, Count de Money, and his associate Berenice, right? I think it's his name. And basically, he goes there to warn him that the peasants are going to revolt, and he says, "But I love the peasants; they're my people. I'm their monarch, and I do everything." And he says "pole," and he's shooting clay pigeons, but they're peasants. Fucking ridiculous. So funny. And then a beautiful woman, played by Pamela Stevenson, asked the king to free her father, who's been jailed in prison. She believes for the last 10 years, she believes he's innocent. And he says, sure, but you have to give yourself to me. And she's like, I was raised in a convent. I never done that. And he's like, everyone does it. I do it all the time. I just did it and I want to do it again. Great fucking back and forth with these two. Fantastic. So she finally agrees to hump him, which is a great word to use in this. It's not crude. It's not fucking. It's not screwing. It's humping. It's fantastically used the word. Anyhow, so he goes back and forth. He has 10 seconds. Humper death, humper death, humper death. It's super funny. Anyway, so she finally gives in. She's going to hump him. So he's like, my room, midnight. Come wearing something not so complicated, because the corsets and the crazy dresses. Boom. Then the Count de Monet, tells him that he has an idea. The revolution's going to happen. And if they come to the king, if they make their way here, they're going to want to kill the king. And he's like, well, that's not good. He says, but if we stage someone else as the king, we keep you safe. The imposter dies. We'll go from there. Well, he's like, who are you going to get to look this dashing? Also played in this vignette by Mel Brooks is, I want to say it's Jacques, who's the piss boy, or what do they call him? Garçon de Piss, a.k.a. Piss Boy. And because he's playing by the same actor, they're like, well, he looks like him, so they dress him up like that. And they're like, you stay here, you be the king. If the revolution's coming, they'll kill you instead. And he's like, shit! There's a bit of like, I can't be a king, can't walk in heels. And he's like walking all goofy, and it's just funny. And so there's a knock on the door, and they like, the revolutions are here, hide. He's like, no, I'll get the door. So he goes to open the door, and it's the maiden from earlier who's there to give himself. She rips open her top, ravaged me, and the Monet is like, oh, and she's like, they're not the king. He's like, no, and he's like having this back and forth with her, and he finally falls over the balcony trying to go after her, and the new king, Imposter King, shows up. She's like, take me, and he's like, this is incredible. He's like, well, shouldn't we like go and go to a nice candlelight dinner and then drink some wine and then go look at some naked statues, get in the mood? And she's like, what? And he's like, what are you doing? She's like, you promised me if I gave you myself, you would free my father. And he's like, oh, I did say that. Yes, that was me. Trying to pretend it's him from earlier. And then they go to find a pardon, and there's just a bunch of execution forms in there, and then one pardon left in there, which is a funny joke, but also kind of backwards, because did that mean he pardoned a lot of people? Because I don't think he did. I think he executed a shit ton of them. But still a funny gag. And then so he frees her dad. She comes back running to him like the revolutionaries are here. They're going to kill you. They'll get captured. They're brought in front of the executioner. They're going to guillotine them all. And he's like, follow my lead. I'll die like a king. As soon as he sees the guillotine, he's like, nope, I don't want to do it. He's trying to talk his way out of it, and they're going to put him in there. He's like, the only thing that's going to save him is a miracle. Here comes Miracle, the horse from earlier, driven by Josephus. And just turns out, guess what? Comicus is Jax or Jokes or whatever his name is. And the piss boy, they know each other. And he's like, jump in. And they ride off, and they're like, yay. And they're like, we're running to the end. And then they look, and it's a view of a big mountain with the giant words of the end carved into it. And that's in the movie. That's in the vignette 5. But then before the credits start, the man before his time breaks into, wait, hold on, coming soon, the coming attractions previews for part 2. And it's little teaser trailers for the vignettes that would be in part 2. This is where the joke comes from. Never was there a plan to make a 2. These vignettes were made as a joke for a sequel that was never planned. It's hilarious. I didn't get it when I was little. I was disappointed I never got part 2. Super hilarious, I thought. Oh, there it is. History of the World Volume 1 was written by Sir Walter Raleigh while prisoner in the Tower of London. He had only managed to complete the first volume before being beheaded. That's the joke. I knew I saw it somewhere on here. That's the joke behind History of the World Part 1. Is it's a play on the History of the World Volume 1, which there was going to be another one, but he was beheaded, so he never got to do Volume 2. And it's hilarious that he planned on that, but he was killed before he can do it. So his work was always titled History of the World History of the World Volume 1 with no Volume 2 ever to be had. Hilarious. So he used that as the joke, History of the World Part 1, which then they teased History of the World Part 2, narrated by Brooks himself, and then he shows off these vignettes, and they're parodies on their own right. And what's funny about it is the fact that they're something I really wanted to watch. Like, for example, he promises they're going to include Hitler on ice. And you see a Hitler ice skating. Fucking hilarious. Then you see Viking funeral, and you see a burning boat, and then he goes to the shore, and you see these big Viking men, and they then take their hats off, but you realize the horns that are on their hats are actually coming out of their heads. It's super dumb. And then you have another parody. So a parody on top of a parody already is Jews in Space, which is a parody of Star Wars and The Muppet Show, where they did pigs in space. And they even did a song that was very similar to, what it was. And just I was dying laughing. But it's funny. So despite the preview, there was never a sequel, and it was never planned to be a sequel because it was a giant joke, all based on the satire and parody name History of the World Part 1, which is a fucking parody of History of the World, or History of the World Volume 1, written by Sir Walter Raleigh, or Rayleigh, I don't know how to say his name, who died before he could make Volume 2. Fucking hilarious. So many good jokes in this. Anyhow, boom. That is the end of this episode. Tune in next week when I have to make up another movie, because I didn't plan for a fifth one. I might do Blazing Saddles. I don't know yet. I thought I had 5 movies picked out, or I thought there was 4 Wednesdays this month. I don't know. I thought I had 5. Maybe I didn't, and maybe I fucked myself. But I'll come up with one because I know there's another comedy I watched when I was younger, and it won't be a sequel like Police Academy 2. I'll think of another one. It'll be fine. Anyhow, that's it for this week's episode, everybody. I've been your host, Cody. This has been the Awesome with Cody, and as usual, at the end of these, I always like to say, let's be awesome.